Hello, my name is Olivia Ndyabagye, and I'm a mental health specialist for the Young Parents Program at the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago. Now, the Young Parents Program is a program for mothers ages 12 to 28 with the age of their child between 0 to 12 who are looking for support and looking for just another program to connect with other moms, but also to gain a lot of skills and suggestions and ways to kind of help parent your child. The program is free, which is great. It's a home visiting program, so you'll have a family support specialist who will come and support you and be there for you. For the Young Parents Program, there's two sections. There's moms who are ages 12 to 20, and we serve moms from 35th Street all the way to 95th Street, from State to the east to the lake. So it's all southeast side of Chicago. Moms who are aging between 21 to 28 or to 30, it's anywhere in Cook County who can use these services. And actually, the only thing is they have to be either pregnant or 2 weeks postpartum, but any age mom. So those are kind of the services that we have for mothers. Under the Young Parents Program, I will be facilitating a Relatives as Parents support group. And what that consists of is relatives who are either uncles or aunts or even taking care of children or taking care of their godchildren, regardless of the situation, but kind of like unexpectedly are taking care of kids that are not biologically theirs. That is a support group for them. And again, both of these groups are helping to release stress and to help to become just having support and supporting the community. The Relatives as Parents support group is every first Wednesday of the month. If you have any questions, please, you have my contact number, which is 312-762-2779. So today we're going to talk about stress and how that affects your body, your mind, and all that good stuff. But also we're going to talk about how to manage and cope with stress. So as we start talking, there's going to be a slide that I created for you guys to check and look, because I'm a visual person, so I like to look at pictures and see the slide. So I'll be talking while you guys be looking at the slide, and then I hope you enjoy the tips. So one of the things I do as a mental health specialist is support you in your mental health and making sure that you are thriving and being the best self that you can. And the ways to do that is to also help and think about and provide some suggestions and coping strategies to get you to where you want to be. And so one of the things that stop you from thriving and being the best self you can is stress. And stress is something that can really take a toll on you. So I would like to jump into that and talk about some tips and also what is stress and how to manage it. So what causes stress in your life? I can name like 10 things right now that causes stress. One for me, for instance, is parenting. I parent a 7-year-old son, and that is a lot of stress. Also work, the environment. So if you live in a place where there's a lot of community violence, which is something that a lot of people are unfortunate to be living in, and that causes a lot of stress. Social media, that is a lot of stress as well. So we're going to talk about how to manage and to think more deeply of what this means. So the top 10 most stressful life events. These are according to Home and Race Stress Scale. So I want to talk about the top 10. Now, a lot of people see as very stressful. So I'll start from 10 and go down to 1 to make it more dramatic. Okay, so number 10 is retirement. 9 is marriage reconciliation. 8 is job loss. 7, marriage. 6, injury or illness. 5, death of a close family member. 4, imprisonment. 3, marriage separation. 2, divorce. And 1 is death of a spouse. So as you can see in the slide, that the trend is grief and loss. So either you're losing a loved one, you're losing your identity, you're losing freedom. And so this is, this is research that this is like one of the top 10. I'm surprised that parenting is not in there. Or just even raising children, because that's a lot of stress as well. And I don't know if you've noticed, but marriage popped up like 3-4 times. I don't know what's up with that. But again, these are things that could be stressful. And some of you may be going through this, maybe one of them or all of them. Or, that's just kind of how life is. So what is stress? Stress is the inability to cope with a perceived, real or imagined threat to one's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, which results in a series of physiological response and adaptation. So stress is your body's response to a certain situation, and it's also subjective. So what may be stressful for you may not be stressful for someone else. So definitely keep in mind that someone can bring up something and you may kind of throw it off or be like, oh, I don't understand, but that's their journey, and that's also just how that could be triggering for them and not for you. So the types of stress. So there's 2 types of stress. There's acute stress and chronic stress. The acute stress, as you can see, it says new challenges, athletic competition, presentation at work. So you can see that it's most common types of stress that it's just daily, even just commuting to work could be stressful. And so your body, it's your body's reaction to new challenges, events, and demands. And even another example for stress is even going to a roller coaster, or even if someone jumps out and scares you, that instant is just stress itself, right? So now if you look to the right side, it's chronic stress. So acute stress, if it's not resolved in acute stress, it begins to increase or last for really long periods of time. It starts to turn into a chronic stress. So for instance, you can look at drive to work, annoying boss, bad work schedule, a difficult spouse, poor sleeping habits, and negative friends. And so again, chronic is something that's going to keep continuing over and over and over. And if you don't do anything about it, it can actually really even hurt you physically and can lead to health problems. So how stress affects the body. So as you can see, it affects everything. So like I mentioned, with chronic stress, if it's not dealt and managed, then it can lead to really health problems. Some of the few things, I'm not going to read all of it, but some of them is skin. So you can produce some acne or stress. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I get stressed, I get like pimples or acne, and you're like, what's going on? Your immune system. So what happens is that the stress suppresses the immune system, and then you're not able to recover from an illness. So you might start getting a lot more colds or fevers or flus. And then also another thing that affects your body is your heart. So increased blood pressure, etc. And then I do want to go on and talking about signs and symptoms of prolonged stress. So not only about physical, but cognitive symptoms, emotional symptoms, physical and behavioral. So under the cognitive symptoms, again, chronic stress, you could start to have memory problems, inability to concentrate, poor judgment, seeing only the negative, constant worry, anxious or racing thoughts. Under the emotional symptoms, you can be depressed, anxiety, irritable, anger. You may feel overwhelmed, loneliness, and isolating yourself, and other mental health problems. And then under the physical symptoms, like I mentioned earlier, you may have chest pains, loss of sex drive, frequent colds or flu, aches, pains, nausea. And then the behavioral symptoms, you might eat less or eat more. You might sleep less or sleep more. So a lot of those things happen. You may withdraw from people, or you may be procrastinating or neglecting responsibilities that you're supposed to do. And then also some people start to use alcohol or cigarettes or drugs to kind of suppress that. Or that's a symptom or an outcome of what happens when you start to become stressed. And then you may get nervous habits like biting your nails, pacing, all this stuff. So these are just signs and symptoms that can happen. So is stress always bad? Well, I guess in my mind, I would say yes, only because of everything that I just mentioned, right? High blood pressure, depression, you're angry, you're all these negative things that you hear, these health problems. So you seem like this is not good for me, this is bad. But actually, it's not bad, it's actually healthy for you. And stress is actually trying to tell, those symptoms and things are trying to tell you that you need to do something. You need to do something about that situation, do something about that problem. So it's not always bad, and actually helps you to deal with tough situations. A lot of stress, so for instance, if we ignore are signals of the body's trying to tell us, and we try to deny and think everything's okay, I'm just going to keep doing whatever, we are not addressing the problem, we're not addressing the situation, which then can create unhealthy symptoms. So again, try not to suppress and ignore these signals. Their body is trying to communicate to you and say, hey, we got to do something about this. So as you can see, there is a tiger, right? Now, the reason why I have this example is because many years ago, centuries, our ancestors, when they saw a tiger like this, their hormones, or another word, cortisol, gave them the burst of energy to escape or to flight. They either fight or they freeze, right? So they either fight the tiger, they're going to run away from the tiger, or they might be behind a tree and freeze. But all of these responses are normal and actually a way to survive. This is the way that they survived, and that's how we are here today. So without our ancestors doing this, without the stress reaction, we wouldn't be here today. So again, our stress reactions is actually like our superpowers, I think. And also the one thing too is each person's going to react differently. So for one person, they may be more of a fighter automatically, whereas the other person may want to run, or another person may again just kind of freeze. But again, they are this is a way of coping and to survive of whatever threat that they're getting. So on the next slides, you can see that we don't need to run from tigers, thank the Lord. But we all have problems and worries, and that triggers our stress response. So think about it. Back then it was a tiger. Now it's all the examples I mentioned at the beginning about acute and chronic stress, right? Poverty, parenting, marriage, everything. So who are your tigers? Think about what are your tigers? What are your stresses that are making you fight, flight, or freeze? What are your responses? And then the next slide asks, if stress is a survival tool, then why does it still feel awful, right? If this is something that we should use to continue us to survive, it still feels not so good. So going back to our example with our ancestors, what they did is they ran off the stress, right? So their heart is beating, they're sweating, they're sprinting, doing all kinds of stuff, right? And then they took a nap, and then they were ready for the next day, right? So now some of us may not do anything about it, right? Our ancestors, they ran. So that cortisol hormones was used. They used that hormone and now it's released and now they're good. Where nowadays we may sit on it and not do anything about it. And the more we sit and kind of ignore, then that's that bad feeling. Your body's trying to tell you, we got to do something. So again, this is very important to listen to your body. And also sometimes too is that we may create unhealthy ways to cope with stress, which is only temporary. So how do people deal with stress? So there are unhealthy ways, like I mentioned earlier. People do drugs, alcohol, sex addiction, isolation and withdrawal, avoidance, self-harm, and these are very temporary, even though this is something that is maybe easier, and also just to tell yourself that even if this is something that you do, you are trying to survive and cope. So don't have compassion for yourself because everybody has different ways of coping. So I don't want to feel people bad. It's just this is what is working, right, at that moment. But as you can tell, it's only temporary. So this is not long term, and also it can make things worse and also physically make your body worse. So that's something that we have to think about. What are healthier ways to cope with stress? So factors that buffer against stress. So the number one thing is your support network. Strong network of supportive friends and family members is an enormous buffer against stress. When you have people to count on, life's pressures don't seem as overwhelming. And on the slip side, the lonelier and more isolated you are, the greater your risk is for being more stressful. So your network, your support network is huge. Second is your sense of control. If you have confidence in yourself and your ability to influence events and persevere through challenges, it's easier to take stress in stride. On the other hand, if you believe that you have little control over your life, that you're at the mercy of your environment and circumstances, stress is more likely to knock you off course. Another buffer is your attitude and outlook. The way you look at life and its inevitable changes makes a huge difference in your ability to handle stress. So if you're generally hopeful and optimistic, you'll be less vulnerable Stress-hardy people tend to embrace challenges, have a strong sense of humor about it, believe in the higher purpose, and accept change as an inevitable part of life. And so a lot of people even think that the stress or the challenges or these new things are happening, I need this to continue to grow and to learn from my experience. So even that shift of perspective will really help you to kind of see things differently and to help you cope through stress. Your ability to deal with your emotions. So that's another factor buffer. If you don't know how to calm and soothe yourself when you're feeling sad, angry, or troubled, you're more likely to become stressed and agitated. Having the ability to identify and deal appropriately with your emotions can increase your tolerance to stress and help you bounce back from adversity. So we'll talk later on a little bit about some of the tips that you can do in terms of managing your emotions. So the next buffer against stress is your knowledge and preparation. So the more you know about a stressful situation, including how long it will last and what to expect, the easier it is to cope. So for example, if you go into surgery with a realistic picture of what to do, if you expect a painful recovery will be less stressful than if you were expecting to bounce back up immediately. So pretty much kind of knowing the realistic what's going to happen ahead of time. Another example is in the mornings. It's super stressful in the morning for me, trying to get my son ready and all that stuff. So knowing and thinking about the realistics of like, okay, it's going to be a stressful morning. I know what's going to happen, and preparing for that will reduce the stress. So I want to talk about 6 tips for quick stress relief. So tip number 1, recognize when you're stressed. So get in the habit of paying attention to your body cues. So you want to observe your muscles and your tones. Are you tight? Is your muscles feeling sore? I know sometimes for me, like my jaws, I start to clench, or I start to have tight jaws, or like I start to breathe fast. So once you realize what your body is doing and recognizing when you're getting stressed is the number 1 thing. Tip number 2, identify your stress response. So people respond to stress differently. Like I mentioned, some people are fight, flight, or freeze kind of people. So you need to kind of think and reflect of like, what do I do when I get in stress? Are you overexcited stress response? So are you a person who just like gets really angry and maybe yells or has a confrontation? Like, because if that's the kind of stress response, if you're a person that is just very overexcited, then you need to find an activity that's the opposite, that's going to calm you down. So for instance, if you need to take a time out, if you need to do some breathing, just opposite. And then there are other people who are underexcited stress response. So if you're a person who withdraw or isolate yourself and when you get stressed, you just shut down, then a good activity to relieve that stress is something that's more energizing, more stimulating. So you may want to go for a walk. You may want to go and talk to someone just to get you out of that. So it's kind of like identifying those responses, and it's kind of important. Tip number 3, bring your senses to the rescue. So to use your senses to quickly release stress, you first need to identify the sensory experiences that work best for you. And this can require some experimentation. So what I mean by finding your sensory inspiration, for instance, for me, I love to smell lotion and lavender, and so one of the senses I'm using my nose. There's many great senses that can actually help you calm down. I actually at work I have this lotion that actually gives you energy, like kind of boosts you up. So I actually like if I start to smell, it gives me some energy. So again, that also requires me to realize and check, like I'm starting to be sleepy or check down. So what do I need to do the opposite? Or if I'm really roused up, what do I need to do to calm down? So I also have a humidifier, so that's something that I like to do. Other sensory, so if you like for me, I also like dark chocolate, eat in moderation, but that's some sensory in terms of taste. So just kind of experimenting and figuring out what works for you. Listening to music, that can also calm people down. Even some people like to touch things and may have Play-Doh or whatever. Have those stress balls. But again, just try to find things that you can, that may work. So tip number 4 is find sensory inspiration. So if you're having trouble identifying sensory techniques, start to think about your childhood and memories. What are some things that you used to do as a child? So I'll use an example for myself. I also love to run and climb when I was little and play. I used to play basketball and soccer. I was a very moving, athletic person. And so I know that something about movement, so like dancing or going for a jog or a walk, actually will help me. So I'm going to try and do that to see if that works. Also, I used to write a lot and do a lot of journaling. And so after college, I kind of stopped and I felt still kind of like off. And so I went back to writing and doing journaling. So there's a lot of things that you may have done when you're younger and that can help you to figure things out. Google or research is always good and nice. And also seeing, like, if you can see a therapist, then you can also kind of talk and figure out what works for them and kind of bring things and give you some strategies. Tip number 5, make quick stress relief a habit. If you don't master the skill in one lesson, like there's no way you're going to master a skill in one lesson. So you need to practice. And the best way to practice is to take small baby steps, and so then it can become second nature. So for instance, think of a time when you know you're going to be stressed. If you're going to commute to work, or if you know, like in the morning times, that's going to be mostly stressful, use that and intentionally use some of the strategies that you're doing. So for instance, if you want to use music to calm you down, or like, okay, I know I'm going to be stressed at this time, at this place, I want to put on some lotion or whatever that is to help you calm down. Or I want to take some deep breaths, which is free and amazing, and actually people don't realize that just taking deep breaths helps and clears your mind. So find a time when you know you're going to be very stressed, and then really train yourself. And once you continue to do that, it's going to become second nature. And then 6, practice wherever you are, like I mentioned. So not only at home, but at work, commuting to places. A quick stress relief at work or on the go is amazing. It's a great way to also figure out that you are in control. And like one of the buffers, this gives you some sense of control, that like I can actually do something about it, even if it's just some little thing. So I just talked to you about the 6 tips for these are quick relievers. I also want to talk about there's 20 tips to relieve stress. And I actually like this slide because it kind of gives you a visual. And also it talks about giving you some ideas, because some people don't really know what they can do. And so if you look at some of them, it talks about like volunteer your time, get creative, treat yourself, avoid toxic people. So they have a lot of other great ways to kind of relieve stress. So if you look below, there's a link and you can check it out and go crazy with it. Also, there's apps to try. Again, if you look below, there's a YouTube that shows examples of what it does. But again, it's about headspace and treating your head right, and to also stop, breathe, and think. So there's also apps that you can do that would really kind of force you to use these strategies. And the last thing is, when your stress is impacting you and you're not able to sleep or eat, or you can't even get up to go to work, all these things, if you feel like it's enabling you to do anything, that's when you really should go for help. And that's when you should either see a doctor, or go to see if you can find a therapist, or again, like I mentioned earlier, join a lot of support groups who can help you and guide you. So you can join the Young Parents Program, Relatives as Parents. And at the YWCA, we have general counseling services located in the Parks Francis Center, or at the Rise. But if you check and look at our website, there are general counselors to support you in all the stress and all the just life struggles that we all deal with. So thank you so much. I hope you really enjoyed the presentation. And again, if you need my information, you can see my number and information below. And I hope that you guys are stress-free. Take care.